my traumatized babies and mentally ill Barbies. I realized all this time I never introduced myself in my videos, and we are putting a stop to that today. I am Allison. Welcome to the channel. I mainly talk about books, cats, spirituality, and magic. And today we're doing a book review, and we are reviewing Book of Night by Holly Black. Holly Black is one of my favorite authors. She's a really big inspiration for my own style. I have loved a lot of her YA books, my favorite being The Coldest Girl in Cold Town. And this is her first adult book. And when I heard about it, I was really excited. And I think a lot of other people were excited too. I think maybe they thought that they were getting Cruel Prince with smut. And no, Book of Night is about Charlie, who is in her late-ish 20s, and she is currently a bartender at a kink club, and it's an alterationist parlor, and I'll explain what that is in a moment. She is a former con artist and thief, and the people she used to work for are called glow-mists. In this world, which is pretty much our world with one exception, glow-mists are people whose shadows have been quickened, which means they have a sort of life of their own. And glow-mists are this version of the world's true magicians and occultists. They can use their shadows to perform various feats of magic. And these glow-mists all are petty packs of criminals, and they hide all of their secrets in books, typically ciphered books, and they hoard them. And so they often employ thieves to steal the books from each other, and also for other reasons like stealing people's shadows. So there's this whole underworld subculture involved with these shadow magicians. And Charlie, having been very, very badly burned in her work life, has determined she's going straight. She's just having regular jobs, and she's not working for these people anymore. So she is a bartender now, trying her best to fend off temptation when people from her former life come around offering her jobs. She has one big nemesis that she had a run-in in when she was very, very young, when she was in training to be a con artist with one of her mother's awful boyfriends. They ran a mediumship scam together where the boyfriend would pretend to be a true medium, and then he would have the young Charlie pose as a ghost. And that's how they would scam people. And so she learned pretty much everything she knew from him and from a couple of other people he introduced her to growing up. And at one of these scams that they were going to run, it was at a billionaire's house, and the billionaire's name is Salt. And Salt is basically a big caricature of everything you would hate about a billionaire abusing their power. And while Charlie and the boyfriend were there, he tries to kill them both. And the boyfriend does end up getting murdered, though Charlie escapes. She's very badly drugged. She escapes with the help of someone she cannot see, someone who is behind her, but she hears them directing her. And she manages to get out. And ever since then, she's had this grudge against Salt, not only because he tried to kill her, but also just because of the power that he holds, wields over people, and abuses. So she kind of is harboring this grudge, and it is something that ends up pulling her back into this world of glow-mist and con artistry and thievery. And she is also living with a boyfriend at this time, and his name is Vince. And she also has a younger sister named Posey, who is a tarot card reader and who very, very desperately wants her shadow to be quickened. And she's like terminally online, trying to figure out how she can become a true magician instead of just a tarot card reader. So that's the setup, that's the story, and honestly, this book was really fun. I usually enjoy Holly Black's style. She is just descriptive enough without it being too much. I think she gives just enough tactile detail to make things very vivid. And what she's writing about and who she's writing about, I tend to appreciate, because her main characters are typically poor. And if they have careers, they are working class. These are people who are waitstaff, bartenders, maybe retail, call centers. So it's that world. It's a world that, I don't know if we rarely get to see it in fiction, but especially when she was writing YA, she would still have her characters more involved with poverty, especially Tithe and Valiant and those stories. The Darkest Part of the Forest, which, let's be real, it was a flop. I don't remember much of what they were doing. I remember they were kind of living on, like, with their parents on this hippie commune. So very regularly, what is being combined with poverty is trauma and neglect. And I always wondered, especially when I was reading the first book in The Cruel Prince, that was the best Cruel Prince book because that is a trilogy. The second two Cruel Prince books, no. They got progressively more lackluster. They weren't bad, they were just not as good as that first book. And I completely just disagreed with the ending of the trilogy in general because I am twisted and I was really hoping we were gonna see Jude do something super aggressive and interesting, and Fearsome, the novel that I queried that didn't get picked up this time around that I am now uploading to this channel, is essentially my answer to what I wanted The Cruel Prince to be, at least thematically. And so whenever I was reading Holly Black's YA books, I was always expecting her to address directly that these books, thematically, what they are actually about is trauma. All of her books are about severely traumatized children, or now in her adult books, severely traumatized children who are now dealing with the fallout of that as they are moving into adulthood, and how that is affecting their relationships, their lifestyle choices, and how, as in Charlie's case, she just can't seem to get out of the self-destructive cycles that trauma tends to lend itself to. Now that she's writing adult, I'm pleased with the fact that she is directly engaging with trauma, because I expected her to say something about it in all of her YA books, but mainly it's just sort of there and never truly commented upon. But every once in a while you will get something from one of her fae characters. In The Cruel Prince, I'm not gonna grab it to get the direct quote, but it's the fox Puka who, when he is interacting with Jude, ends up saying something like, "We're the forgotten children." And I was just like, yes, that is what these books are about. When she's writing about the fae and the children who end up involved with the fae, she is writing about forgotten, abused, and neglected children. Those are the ones who fall into those liminal spaces. So I, of course, am very drawn to that because it's stuff I've been dealing with my own life, and it's a reflection of my own life in various ways. While I have never dealt with poverty, a lot of my friends have, especially growing up. So the spaces that her characters are in are spaces that I was in. And the people that she's writing about are the people that I've known and love very much. So I appreciate it. It feels very at home to me. It feels very familiar to me in a way that a lot of YA and adult books won't. Especially because she tends to be writing from the same subcultures I'm involved in as well. And her characters have the same tastes and interests as I do. And just to throw it out there, Holly Black even before the larger conversations of diversity within YA and in publishing in general, was always writing diversely. She always had queer characters, and her books were always multicultural, even if her main characters were white people. Going back and rereading her Fae trilogy before The Cruel Prince, I was like, oh, she was doing this like way back in the day, because when you grow up with that, you're gonna write it, like that's just your lived experience. It's gonna show up in your work because it feels fake not to write about that. And in Book of Night, that diversity and range of class and sexual identity and gender really shows up, because Charlie is working in a bar that not only services kink, the owner is a sex worker, but it is also sort of the glow mist version of a tattoo shop. I'm so sorry, I got interrupted, but I know what I'm trying to do, and what I cannot get out of my mouth is this alterationist's shop or parlor is the glow mist answer to a tattoo shop. Because even if you don't have a quickened shadow, you can go to a glow mist and they can alter your shadow and make it look all kinds of different ways. And people have like wings added to them, or, you know, they look like an animal of some kind, and it's very, very fashionable to do so. Something that I especially liked about Book of Night was its discussion of magic in conjunction with con artistry. And I think a lot of people maybe don't like to recognize how close the two actually are, but they are very close. And you will notice that magic, the occult, New Thought, the New Age, is often tied very, very strongly to significant cons, MLMs being one of them. MLMs are much more strongly tied to the New Age and New Thought. And typically, if you're gonna have an occult-based scam, if it's not just like a silly course thing, it's not really a scam, it's just like, nobody on the internet can really teach you anything, like maybe a couple of people, but like check your sources. It's not really a scam. It's just that everybody has a course nowadays, right? And they're not all valuable. But occult-based scams are usually much more entrenched in conspiracy. There has to be this existing weird narrative around the scam before the occult is typically involved. And often in a lot of these conspiracy theories, especially the ones in the New Age, often the occult is sort of painted as the bad thing. Like, people who are occultists are all super evil and demonic and this, that, and the other, and the people who are involved with the conspiracy and the scam are the ones who are, you know, good, fighting the good fight. And that's how they get you. They make you think that you are good and special and that you are the hero. And then once that little part of your brain and emotions are engaged, then they can make you do whatever they want. And sometimes that's taking your money for, like, they'll say it's fundraising, but really they just take it and nothing ever comes of it. Or it will be to manipulate you to a political end. But regardless, magical methods, New Thought methods, are often used in scams. I tend to think of con artistry as unethical magic. Why is a con a form of magic? Because it is getting something for nothing. It is using your will to get someone to do something or get someone to give you something, usually the exact thing that you are saying you are going to do or give to them. Like, you are saying you are going to make them wealthy, but in fact, the only reason you are saying that is to get the other person to give you money. That's the con. And that's magic, because you are getting something concrete for just saying something, for a dream, for ephemera. And people fall for it. It doesn't matter how often you are vocal about how these scams are run, how magic is involved. It really doesn't matter, even though I do think we should still keep talking about it because it's unethical and I care about people. Unfortunately, people want to be scammed. They really do. People want to believe. And in fact, in my opinion, going through these sort of dances with each other, giving someone money, it's almost like the fantasy that is being sold to that person becomes more real to them. What they are actually paying for is the amplification of this reality that's never going to come to fruition. But as long as they have another person and a number of other people all reinforcing the idea that it's going to happen and that it is real, that is what the money is actually paying for. So now I'm wondering, is it a scam? I mean, yeah, because these are vulnerable people, I guess, and we are all susceptible to this in one way or another. So, you know, when you immediately think like, how could that smart person be so dumb? It has nothing to do with intellect. It has everything to do with emotions. All of us are vulnerable in that way, and we just need to be aware. So I really love, though, that Charlie is a con artist. I love the way that her mind works. I love, just because I don't know too much about like actually stealing from people. Like, she does a lot of breaking and entering into homes. She does a lot of pickpocketing. And Holly Black kind of goes through the minutia of that, how you are doing that well. And when it comes to pickpocketing and that sort of thing, sleight of hand is involved in that. Stage magic, close-up magic, misdirecting someone. So when she starts going through all the various methods that people use to steal and to get away with something right in front of your face, I find that extremely interesting. It just opens up this whole new world for me that I'm like, oh my gosh, really? I had no idea that was even going on, but it is. And it is because con artistry and criminality are not my world. That is one world that I have never been closely involved in or known someone who has been closely involved in, at least at the time. So yeah, just me talking about Charlie's profession and the fact that, you know, she deals with trauma, I don't know if I need to say that Charlie is an unlikable protagonist, but here's the thing though. I don't think Charlie is unlikable at all. I like her. I think she's really cool. And a lot of times when people say a protagonist is an unlikable protagonist, especially when it's a girl or a woman, what they really mean is this character is real. They mean like this character isn't a caricature. They mean that she is allowed to be dysfunctional on the page. And Charlie is, and I appreciate that. I will say though that there was a moment kind of around like the mid of this book, and I want to say, just as someone who has dealt with trauma and trauma cycles myself, I'm about to say something potentially a little bit harsh about dealing with someone in the thick of that. And it was a point that I reached with Charlie. When you have someone who's stuck in those self-destructive cycles, that gets very exhausting to be around. And by the midpoint of the book, I had kind of had it with Charlie. And she picks it up a little bit. I know that's not fair. It's like she's behaving realistically and I'm saying that it annoyed me. But in real life, it's exhausting. It's exhausting to be around someone like that. People have been exhausted by me when I've been especially like that. And it's kind of a hard thing to acknowledge and process about yourself, but it's true. So I don't say that to cut anyone down. It's just that there's some things that I think as people dealing with chronic trauma and the chronic mental health issues as a result, that when we either do not have the access to get the help we need or the cycle is preventing us from getting the access that we need, it's just an unfortunate side effect. I think that people who get criticized for saying like, hey, it is hard for me to deal with this, at least online, they tend to get jumped on and are like, oh, you see, this is like the second someone with mental illness actually starts showing symptoms of mental illness, then everybody has a problem. Here's the thing, when you are in the thick of that, most people aren't equipped to deal with it. Most people aren't equipped to deal with the mental illness or trauma. They're only equipped to inflict it. They can't deal with the aftermath. And the people who haven't ever dealt with that in their lives, when they get around it, to them, it's sort of like they don't know how to deal with it because it's never been part of their lives. And the only people who really are equipped to deal with it are the people who have been trained to deal with it. And I've gone off on a big tangent. It's just meant to say, I really like Charlie. She did exhaust me a little bit with her behaviors because her headspace is like constantly running herself down. And then she's running herself down and then she's like, but I want to do it again, right? And that's totally like, that is what it is. It's just like, I know this is the wrong thing, but I am drawn to it. I want to blow things up because I am afraid, because it's all I've ever known, because when you show me actual affection, I don't trust it, because I think it's a trick. She thinks everything is a con. When you grow up in that environment, everything is transactional and everything is a con, and silly you if you get fooled by any of that again, because it will then be your own fault, especially when you know how the con works. And just as a warning for people who maybe have domestic violence trauma, like Charlie gets her shit kicked in this book a lot. And there's an especially violent exchange between herself and the guy that she's robbed. I don't know that it's very long, but I mean, it's very descriptive and it's very violent. And if you have been in situations like that or have been around situations like that and cannot handle that within your book space or headspace right now, just know that it's in that book. Two of the big things that I did not care for about this book. One, I did not know that this is the start of a series. I did not look into it. I just knew Holly Black had written an adult book. And then when I got to the end, I was like, oh, awesome, it's a cliffhanger. And when I looked at Goodreads, it says #1 on it. So that irritated me. And as for our main villain, Salt the billionaire, I think he's too much. Salt is essentially like a billionaire, serial killer, psycho, Mangala, like a cultist guy. Just every single stereotype that you think of when you think of billionaire villain. I kind of hated that. I kind of hated that it was so black and white. Oh, something else that I was like, this is stinky about the writing. Some stinky writing in this book. Towards the end of the book, Charlie is pulling off kind of like a very interesting sort of heist and con. And there are things that the reader should know immediately because we are in Charlie's head. But the way that it's written, it's sort of, and when I saw it, I was like, immediately, I was like, she's concealing something here with the way she's writing this, which isn't inherently bad. But then when we got to the actual like reveal for what was going on, I was just like, this is bad writing. This little concealment that you did here could not have concealed all of this. Like there's like a huge amount that in the moment when she's doing these things, she would not be worried about certain things that she is like internally worried about. Like it's written as though she's experiencing those feelings in the moment, and that ends up being revealed as like part of the con. But we are exclusively in her head and in her thoughts. We would have known that. So when she tries to do this like, whoa, but like really, she's doing the prestige. She's doing the prestige at the end, and the prestige is piss poor. It was bad. It was poorly constructed. I was disappointed with it. And I was just like, oh. That's clunky. That's clunky construction. None of that completely ruins the book for me. I enjoyed it. It's something that I will keep, and I will definitely keep reading more books in the series. This reminded me of The Ninth House, if The Ninth House was good and not horribly bloated. So I would say if you like love The Ninth House, you might not, just like based on it, you might not like this. If I hated The Ninth House and enjoyed this, and it reminds me of what like The Ninth House could have been, probably you will read this and go, this is a trash, like worst ever ripoff of The Ninth House. The Ninth House was bad, just to let you know. That was not a good book at all, and neither was Shadow and Bone. Everyone says I should give Six of Crows a chance, but I have read 2 stinkers. by Leigh Bardugo, and everybody raved about Shadow and Bone, and I read the first book and I was just like, what the fuck? Ugh. Okay, y'all like mayonnaise, that's fine, like I like it too, but I typically like it on like a nice like spicy sandwich, you know what I mean? Like I don't like mayo on a saltine, which is what Shadow and Bone and the Ninth House were. Mayo on a saltine. So if you don't like mayo on saltines, you might like Book of Night. I feel like this is a September-October vibes book, and I will probably reread it. This is a keeper for me. I will not be donating this or anything else. I will definitely keep reading because I most definitely want to see what happens to Charlie and if she is able to overcome her own self-destructive cycles and live, you know, the happiest life that she is capable of living.